Welcome to Artificial Breakdown, live at Inventures 2025. Let's get innovative.
Welcome to Artificial Breakdown. We're live at Inventures, and Carrie unfortunately isn't here today. She's speaking at Uppbeat. So this is probably going to be one of the best podcasts we ever do. And there's a couple more today, and then she'll be back, and we'll be back in the regular rhythm. But it's my pleasure today to have Chris Hogg, founder and CEO at Digital Journal, here with me today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And you've already spoke once, and you're speaking again tomorrow. So busy.
We are busy here. Yeah. We've got a team of journalists covering all things Inventures this week.
Oh, cool. So you have everyone out here kind of grabbing media and taking pictures and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. And do you get a chance to see like any of the sessions, or are you just heads down pretty much?
For us, this week's a lot of heads down. We've got an interview booth, not unlike this one.
Right.
And our role is to help storytell and amplify some of the messages and key insights coming out of this event.
Oh, cool. Oh, that's nice. And the Digital Journal. So you have a background in journalism.
Yeah.
And now you've kind of pivoted to kind of your own, you're the founder of this. So I am curious of that little transition point when you were doing good old journalism back in the day. Did you start to see that there's a different path? What was it, technology that was starting to creep into your life? Where did this kind of transition start?
Digital Journal has been around for a very long time, and I'm actually not a founder.
Oh.
I'm a very early employee who's become a leader.
Okay.
Just to make sure that that's correct. The Digital Journal is, we've been around for 25 years. I started as a freelance journalist while I was still in school a long time ago, 23 years ago. The company was very early, fledgling, started a publication, and we've covered technology for 20 years. And the moment in time, we've always been looking for ways to automate. We're a small company, a dozen people covering multiple markets across Canada, US, and overseas. And so for us, AI was just another technology at first. And then when we realized how much it can do to simplify, speed up, and it really changes the playing field for a small company competing on a large scale from a media perspective. We've got a fairly large audience that follows. And so AI enables us to do things that we couldn't do in the old school journalistic way. So probably the wake up call that most people have with AI, just for us, it was applied to the world of journalism.
Oh, interesting. And just before we dive into AI, like 20 years, so Digital Journal, was it always called Digital Journal?
Yep.
Yeah.
Always called that.
So 20 years, I was around doing our stuff back then too. So that's the era of CDs and internet's just kind of getting up with dial-ups and stuff like that. So it must have looked very, very different back then.
I can still remember breaking news on stories like companies like Facebook starting up, Napster being a thing. So yeah, it's a big throwback. We've always covered technology. In the early 2000s, it was about consumer tech. Most people didn't really think about technology as part of their lives. It was the iPod in their pocket, or a computer, or a social media network, whereas today technology is so everywhere.
Yeah.
So we've scaled from consumer tech. One thing we have changed is we have a B2B focus largely now. So covering how technology impacts business, innovation, digital transformation, really helping organizations and leaders figure out what's happening. And, when we get to sit down and talk with people who've done things, tried things, screwed them up, or done well, those stories help others. So it's always been about that, but it's a lot more focused now on B2B tech.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And still kind of dragging my heels back in the day, but when the phones came out and people started taking videos and cameras, and now they got a publishing platform with social, that must have changed journalism right at that moment as well. Just as far as like, you've got now the whole world is publishing content all over the place with random levels of quality. Like it must be hard to kind of maintain integrity in the journalism side, because you're trying to deal with all that's going on at the same time. Right?
Yeah, and it's actually the thing that made Digital Journal go from a small audience to a large audience was the advent of what was then called citizen journalism, We were one of two companies in Canada who decided to open our platform. The rise of social media was changing how people consumed content, and we were a small team with no budget. So we decided that one of the co-founders of Digital Journal is a developer. And so he and I architected a platform that would allow people to contribute news. Back then, it was a very unusual thing. So
Yeah.
citizen journalism is what put Digital Journal on the map, because we had contributors all over the world sharing stories and allowing us to reach a scale that we couldn't have with a small team on our own. Toronto based, and it allowed us to expand in every market.
So smart. Yeah, that's amazing. So let's go into AI. So how did that, it's recent, but it started to trickle in, I'm assuming. So, I've got a note here about how are you treating it? Is it a partner? Is it an assistant? Is it a threat? Like, how does AI work with journalism?
Yes. Is the answer. For us, and I don't know that I don't think that we are representative of how a lot of journalists think about AI.
Right.
I would probably be pretty unpopular in some traditional journalistic circles.
Yeah.
And I've also met many journalists who are using it. So for us, it's a companion. ChatGPT, I think whatever it was 2.5, 3 years ago when it launched, was the starting point where we started dabbling.
Right.
Mostly for process, and as a companion, we fiddled around with it like everyone else, and didn't really see the full business impact until until the large language model started to get better, until we started actually using it every day. That was a big learning curve, is you can't just use it off the side of your desk.
Right.
Process really starts to change. So
Yeah.
for us, and then also we were like everyone in the world of content creation. You have this existential crisis on, am I going to exist tomorrow with
Right.
this thing?
Yeah.
And so part of it was just like, we have to learn how to use it. How does it work? What is it good at? What is it not good at? And then how can we augment our journalistic storytelling using it to be more effective, deeper stories, wider scale? Like, it's, again, at the end of the day, just a technology.
Right.
But for us, it was looking at ways on how are we going to compete or collaborate with this? And we chose the collaboration route.
Right. Oh, interesting. So, and I imagine there's ChatGPT, and then kind of similar, there was kind of stuff like Perplexity that
Yep.
actually had source
Yep.
on it. I imagine that kind of research tool maybe makes more sense in some ways, because there's this big vagueness around where does ChatGPT get its information from, and there's lots of bias, and there's a lot of talk of bias in these tools, and you all would probably know better than anybody what journalism bias means, right? So do you feel that when you're going through these things?
Totally. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, right.
It's an absolute. I think some of the things that journalists carry, the ones that would practice real journalism, I would say, is like, you're naturally skeptical of everything. I find that's a trait in most journalists. And so AI is another source, whether you're talking to a person who has an agenda or a machine that might have been trained incorrectly or not on a right level of data.
Yeah.
Bias is absolutely huge. It's largely trained on a North American lens. There's a very white male bias if we get into image generation, and other tools are better. We're now working with Perplexity, Claude, Gemini, a bunch of different tools, and we actively experiment on how, when we get into telling stories of indigenous groups or women in tech, or things where we can start to see the cracks in some of the training data. It is getting better. If we had this conversation a year ago, it would have been a bigger dumpster fire than it is now. But really looking at how can we assume everything is biased, and then what can we go and find from a research perspective that we can upload to our training data, because we have a fully trained, we primarily use ChatGPT right now
Right.
for content, but looking at ways that we can fix it by uploading training data, uploading documents, giving it the perspective we want it to have. So we are objective and fair. And, lived experience is really hard for AI to even begin to understand. We as humans struggle with it. So we do our best to try and, when we're starting leveling the playing field, we're starting from a journalistic process. We're starting by making sure that the training data is as accurate and representative as possible.
Oh, is that ever neat? Yeah, we met with was Brown Eagle and Ethan Clark. I don't know if you've met them. but Indigenous, and they're talking about just the lousy picture that
Yeah.
AIs portray of them, and it's just so not fair.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's so. Maybe let's talk a little bit about a digital journal, like as far as because it feels like now you're getting into research, you're blowing up in so many different areas. What's the future? Where do you think you're going here?
It's a good question. I don't think we have it fully figured out. The one thing I've learned over 23 years at Digital Journal is there's no such thing as stable constant. The media industry as a whole has been disrupted over and over and over.
Yeah.
The business model is broken, the traditional business model. So for us, we, as a business, so today Digital Journal has teams in Toronto and Calgary. We have freelancers, sort of like a bureau model in the US, UK, Australia, and the Middle East, so we can try and maintain an international presence. We reach 1.5 million people a month who are coming to us largely for learning and innovation news, and sometimes news of the day on how markets are changing. And from a business standpoint, the business model has always, ad-based media companies don't work anymore. So looking at ways like research is one thing that we've started to do. It gives us original insight, original information. We've worked with a company called RKI, who also comes from the media background, where we this week launched a study on innovation across Canada, and we looked at what leaders, and looking at it from a workforce perspective on how people experience innovation. And for us, that's completely new insight. A lot of innovation research focuses on economic development and outputs and cities and competition and who's attracting talent. And for us, there's a very big untold story on what's the employee or workforce experience. And so coming back to your question on us as a business, we do the traditional storytelling, we do custom research reports with a partner, RKI, and then we look at the audience groups and ultimately data. It's all about data in the end, where we are going to be able to deliver unique insight that adds value to the audience. But then we also essentially stockpile and start to build an intelligence platform that we have data on how people work in innovation, and we can cover it. And so there's the research side. We have events and event coverage. We're a media partner here at Inventures.
Right.
So looking at ways to help when everyone meets in one place at one time, it's helpful for us to be part of that process. So our business model is the unique aspect of data events, because we can tell stories and reach people, and then bridge the need for companies to tell their stories. Traditional journalism would, in the old model, if a company wanted to tell a story, the editor would decide that it's journalistically valuable, it's earned media,
Right.
or it would be an advertorial, which most of the time are shit, just awful experiences to read. So we try to work with organizations, and we do have separation of church and state, but also we believe that companies should be part of the storytelling process, because it's not advertising. And that's ultimately when we go down the sponsored content route. It's really great journalistically driven storytelling on what companies are doing, because there's a corporate innovation angle. So long answer to an easy question. For us, it's about the research and insight, the events, and then corporate and sponsored content is what it used to be called, but we just see it as like a brand storytelling. It's one of the layers that we think others can learn from, and brands can be part of that process.
Oh yeah, I didn't think it was going to be an easy answer, because there's like a million different directions to go. But it feels like you've kind of made yourself open enough that you can kind of pivot however you need to, which is so important.
Yeah, innovation is not stagnant; it changes every 6 months. There's something new to talk about, new to explore. And when we used to cover, business and technology broadly, and when you start to get into it, like technology is a means to an end. It's always about people. People matter more than anything. And one of the things that we experienced coming out of the pandemic was a revisit of our purpose overall, where covering stories matters, but we over and over again, even as a Toronto-based company that has grown out west, making a very explicit effort to help tell the Western Canada's technology story, because it's grossly undercovered by mainstream media. The trade press don't really do it. So establishing a presence here, being at all of the events, helping tell stories. Our purpose that emerged out of that was elevating voices. Our job is to help bring those voices up out of the noise and really help tell stories of folks who don't always get a spotlight shone on them. So it could be a corporate innovator, it could be someone in government, it could be an entrepreneur. For us, it's the innovation ecosystem and all the layers that are inside that.
I love that, because I do feel like, as just the average punter here, that it's getting harder and harder to know where to go for credible sources, right? Like you see that, videos can be faked to the point where you can't tell anything. Everyone's worried about getting that phone call from their mom or son that's got it all kind of like there's some emergency that someone's using their voice, and there was a moment, I think, where it was uncanny valley and everyone can kind of pick out what's fake and what's not, and people pride themselves in being like, oh, AI wrote that and AI wrote that. But I think now it's kind of getting past that point where it's really, really hard to tell, except for the real bad stuff.
It really is. And the war of SEO has made the game even more challenging, where companies that find every company is just cranking out content using AI. Google is struggling big time with keeping up with all of it.
Yeah.
Ranking algorithms are a total mess because all of a sudden companies, and we're not talking about the scale of I go to my website and I create 20 articles about X.
Right.
It's 20,000 articles about X, and content farms this is yet another wave of companies. It's really easy to set up what looks like a media company now and generate content that appears to be real. I think the role from a journalistic standpoint, we use AI to create content or with content. We disclose it. We had to face things like ethics discussions very, very early on in the process. Yeah. And that collaborative, going back to your first question, the collaboration with AI really has changed the responsibility of an editor. In an old newsroom, an editor would assign stories, edit stories, and decide what made the newspaper or the broadcast or the publication online. Yeah. They still do that, but anyone who's augmenting with AI, the role, AI can generate content, but it can't really decide what deserves to be published. And so the role of an editor is still very, very important. The judgment on what's missing, what needs context, that's really the editor's job now for us. And fact checking is super important. And the old journalistic approach would be, if you can't find a way to fact check something, it might not be true. And so disclosing that to the audience, if you can't find ways to corroborate, it's tough when you're breaking news, or it's tough when you are talking to people where there isn't a way to check it to see if something was said that is accurate. But that's always existed as a challenge in newsrooms. It's just on steroids now with AI faking a ton of content.
Yeah, I can just imagine the challenge that you're up against with all that. It seems daunting in so many different ways. We have talked a fair bit about ethics, like throughout everything, because I think that comes up so much with AI. And where do you start and stop? Who owns rights? Everyone's stepping all over each other's toes, it seems. And it's like suddenly everyone's got this fantastic tool at their fingertips, and everyone can produce. And it's hard to know where, again, with ChatGPT, it's hard to know, especially image generation and video, it's hard to know where they're pulling from and how do you kind of preserve those artists' rights. We talked to someone about music, and it was just incredible how complex actually assigning rights would be, that you actually need AI to help with the rights management. So how are you finding like some of that stuff? I imagine it's more source-based, but like finding out where you're pulling things and how does ethics work into where you're at now?
It's a very big question. When we started moving from testing and dabbling into we're going to change our workflow because of AI, ethics was the very first thing that we talked about. So for us, I guess to briefly touch on the workflow, because it matters from an ethics standpoint, a lot of what we do with coverage is original. So we will do interviews. And so it helps when we know that we are the source of the information. There still could be bias from the person who obviously has an agenda when they're talking to you. But when we get an interview done, we take that and then we can use AI to go and fill out and round out some of the stories. So we can do multiple interviews and look for pattern matching. We can go back into our database and look for things that have previously been said.
Yeah.
We can look for ways to, if someone says something, a lot of the editors on our side will go and look at what has been said. Is there anything here that might be questioned? Is this new information? Has this person said anything else like this in other interviews? Because if we're trying to add value to the audience, we will often try to find the original nuggets or the original insights.
Oh, interesting.
So we'll use AI to figure out what else is out there. We will use it to fact check, but it's never perfect, and we have to recognize that. The companion aspect, it would be, we will prompt it to say, fact check this, and it'll come back. And AI is so confident, and it writes so confidently, even when it's totally wrong and hallucinating.
So positive too. Yeah.
So the journalistic approach is, prove it to me. Find me a source and show me it, because I need to fact check that on my own. And so many times it'll come back saying, here's a link, and you go to it and it's a 404. It doesn't even exist. Or it has confidently scraped something out of a Reddit forum that it's not journalistically accurate. We've killed stories because we couldn't verify things. But the process of going and verifying with AI, and then when there's always a human in the loop at Digital Journal at every step. And AI is a companion to build out, flush out, move faster, find nuggets of information. And we will use it for image generation also. It's a big challenge in media. It's costly to have photographers everywhere. We're big supporters of creatives, and original photography is always preferred. But you don't always have the opportunity to use it. So we will use AI for image generation, just because the internet needs images to get found and get noticed, and we want people to visit the page. And then everything that we do that has AI that touch it, we publicly disclose with an AI ethics statement. One of the very first things we did, there's a big red sticker on the bottom of an article saying AI had a hand in this article. It doesn't do all of the article. It doesn't replace humans who check things. And ultimately, the editor who clicks publish is responsible for that piece of journalism, even if it's AI augmented.
I feel like, we were talking about this before, and I can understand why journalism would do that. The argument was a little bit is like, okay, do you need to say that we used autocorrect when we were using like typing words, or we were using computers to, does there come a point where everyone just assumes that like AI is now just a way of life, and that's just part of how we do things as a tool, versus having to, probably notify everybody on every article?
I think so, but I don't think that will happen anytime soon as a widespread trend across newsrooms. I still talk to many journalists who are completely against this approach and will never use it.
Oh, I see.
There are, the saying, I believe, is even if you're not using AI, you will lose to someone who is. Eventually, I think becomes quite true across all industries.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that there's a stigma, because journalism, the institution and the practice, is about fact checking and accuracy. And if it's done well, in my opinion, it shouldn't matter what tools you use to get there.
Right.
If I use you as an expert source, and I'm using AI as an expert source, I'm still going to go through the same process to make sure it's accurate before we publish it.
Yeah.
But that's not a widely held opinion. That's more of what we believe. And the need for people to be involved, I don't think will go away. I don't know that AI is not curious the same way that a journalist is. And so it can crank content out, it can find pattern matching for words, but it doesn't replace curiosity.
Yeah, no, I feel this is
Right
a
now.
pattern that I've heard. Yeah, right. That's the asterisk on everything.
Yeah, for now.
But what I've heard from many people now is just the nitty gritty, the stuff that used to suck up time, that wasn't necessarily leveraging your experience and knowledge. Like, that's the stuff that's so wonderful, to be able to have AI do some of that stuff so that you can be adding, your highest value into the work. So you're actually doing more high value work, and the other stuff is that you would have been stuck, like whatever it is, making presentations or compiling things or doing research, like pattern recognition and stuff like that. Like, all that stuff can be taken care of. So there's just this way of potentially working with it that potentially delivers a better product.
Yeah, and there's also audience experience, and like, I guess we can call it customer experience changes.
Right.
In the first wave, one of the biggest transformations that happened at Digital Journal and the rise of social media was the rise of something called process journalism. If we look back into the rise of social media, process journalism became a big thing. And process journalism was about, before social, you would do your fact checking, you would get everything ready, you would publish an article when it was done. Social media, when people are at events or at press conferences or see a crash on the side of a highway and they can report it, there wasn't always the opportunity to go and fact check something because people started reporting things in real time.
Right.
And so a lot of journalism changed, digital journalism, I should say, things online. It changed because, do you not publish until you have all the facts, or do you publish as a process and tell people what you're learning as you go? That's an ethics conversation in and of itself, because you could misreport at the first step and stay committed to it until you get to the end. And I think the same thing is happening now with AI, but it's on steroids. Newsrooms across the country are shrinking. Most media companies are nowhere near as big as they once were because of revenues and the way the business model has been challenged. So newsrooms a lot of the time have to trade speed for accuracy, and no journalist would say that they're going to publish something inaccurate, but there is a pressure of speed because audiences expect things quickly.
Yeah.
And AI does speed up process. It changes expectations. So both audiences and journalists will have to make thoughtful reporting feel, um, we'll have to go back to that process element if we're going to be publishing something. But if you're waiting until you know all of the facts, or waiting until AI can fact check it for you, the audiences don't always stick around. So this another business model challenge is that aspect.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating, because I feel like it is first to the table wins in some of these cases, right? And an hour can be too late, I imagine, in some cases. So
And we're seeing it in the US with the coverage of US politics. We've got to a point, I'm not going to get political, but we've got to a point where you need to have leaders on TV just saying whatever they think. And it wasn't that long ago that some of those things would never get published because they were inaccurate or
right.
would need to get fact checked first. But now it's a race to the first of what are they going to say next, and are we going to get it? And even if it's inaccurate, we'll just show it to the audience and they can make up their own mind.
Yeah. That is fascinating. How about like a little bit of a topic change, but something I've heard a little bit with AI is this whole thing about personalization in news. So, is that kind of like the long vision where it's like I can log in and get news that is super tailored to me, more so than ever before, because it understands, everything about me, right? Is that on the horizon, where I'm like, I would hear a different version of the news than someone else because it's me? Does that make sense?
It's happening right now. There's many large organizations that are already doing that. Newsletters personalized based on what you've done.
Right.
There's an intelligence platform that underpins a lot of media companies to try and figure out over time, what do you consume, and can we change your experience? Does your front page look different than someone else's?
Right.
We've experimented with it, looking at geography, preference on content type, recency. One of the things that we also challenged ourselves with, though, in that whole process is, if we give you what you want, it becomes an echo chamber. Or if,
Right.
when we get into political coverage, if you are of a certain political stripe and you consume that content, you may not get a wider perspective. So again, everything comes back to the ethics discussion, or the responsibility of what we're not a political publication, but we do touch on politics when it influences policy, for example.
Yeah.
And so we have to think about, if we personalize too much, you might not see things that you should see. Our responsibility as a publisher is to also give a fair, accurate, representative view. And I worry a little bit, we talk about AI, but the invisible hand of algorithms are also playing a very significant role in how we consume media and news. I personally have been very frustrated by the change in law that made Meta pull news off of Facebook and Instagram. As a
Right.
Canadian company, we're invisible. It's two of the largest platforms. We have 120,000 followers on both channels, and in Canada, you can't see us because those decisions were made. And I find it's frustrating as a publisher, because fake news can go on those platforms, but real news can't. But even the bigger challenge when we're thinking about personalization or content is, people, there may be some who want to blame the media for, missing the story or not getting the story, but algorithms at the end of the day are also deciding what people see, not just in social, but in search, in AI as a whole. It's part of the landscape. So journalism for us is about trying to push back on some of those filters and levers. And I think
Yeah.
personalization matters, but being well rounded there's still a really important role for that.
Yeah, I agree. There's that. Well, there was that show that I think everyone talked about once it came out on Netflix, but it just the algorithm, like understanding that. I think there's a fine balance between getting personalized information and completely blindsided information because I only like the right wing or the left wing or something like that. So you just see more and more and more of the same. But it would be interesting to be like, okay, yeah, I know that you like to have these kinds of mixtures of stuff, and we know that you usually work out in the morning, so we're going to deliver this at 2 o'clock, and we're going to give you a highlight reel because we know you like video. Like, there's so many things that could be like AI could potentially create a better experience, but the flip side of that is it could be completely blindsided. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and AI, there's the challenge of objectivity. That's always been a challenge in media. There will be perceptions that some media companies are a little left or a little right or really right or centrist.
Right.
And a journalist's job is to try and maintain objectivity. And it's very challenged because neutral reporting has always been, even humans, they have their own bias, their own experience in the world, how their lived experience, how they see through their lens. So
Yeah.
if news breaks or something happens, an editor will take that to her or his writing of a piece of content, and AI can help expand the worldview. So like, what am I not thinking about? We do that all the time. Or what would be someone else's perception of this? The challenge though is the AI can force us to confront what neutral reporting means and what sources we use. And we find that we've done political coverage is always a challenge. When we've used tools like Gemini, we've actually gotten responses back. We'll fact check, when did this minister say this, or who, tell me about a policy that would impact X, Y, or Z.
Right.
And Gemini would come back saying, I'm not really good with politics, so you're going to want to fact check this. Whereas ChatGPT comes in with confidence saying, yep,
Great question.
and it's
Yeah.
dated. It's like thinking about when something was said is a really important responsible step in fact checking, because large language models, when they're trained, they don't always have recent information until you tell them to go get it.
Right.
So I could ask for a policy update on what the Minister of Innovation says, and I get something from last year. And if you're not fact checking of when they said that and has there been something since then,
Yeah.
every choice of what you cover, it uncovers some level of bias.
Yeah.
So our teams are asked and trained to, like, here's your view, ask for another view, and challenge your own assumptions when you're going into this.
Yeah. As someone mentioned it, was it unconscious incompetence, which is,
Yeah.
I think, true of most of these things, where the average person wouldn't know to ask the question that you are asking. So you still need, I think, experts at the helm to kind of keep this thing in check, right? Because there's this almost like people feel this is an omnipotent kind of being that gives just life advice, and there's no challenge needed, right? But it is made by a company, right? It's inherently biased and flawed, right? So, and there's competing products. Like, you got to still think of it as a bit of software.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons through the pandemic, when we revisited our company purpose,
Yeah.
and it became focused on elevating voices, is AI has sort of led to the collapse of the middle, is what we call it, where
Right.
a lot of media coverage now is on extremes. So like, what's super viral, or what's really emotional, or what's very controversial. Those, if it bleeds, it leads, is an old journalistic saying. And now with AI, it's just, what can I do to generate clicks? If the ad supported business model forces media companies to try and generate page views. So an explicit decision we made was, obviously we need to generate revenue, but it can't be at the expense of trying to tell what that missing middle, the middle ground stories get buried.
Yeah.
And journalists have to fight harder to cover the nuance in the systems that reward noise. So
Yeah.
it's, again, everything comes back to ethics. Literally everything I'm saying to every question that you're asking,
Yeah.
there's an ethics consideration on what is our responsibility as a journalistic organization.
Yeah. And I feel like we're still catching up on that.
Absolutely.
Chris, let's end on a high note. What? Because this is all great, but I feel like, what are you most excited about? Like, as you look at digital journal or even just journalism or where everything's going, what gives you hope over the next little while, or what are you into here?
I am a huge fan, despite all the challenges with AI.
Yeah.
Our business model and our operations and our workflow have forever changed, and they won't go back
Right.
to not being AI augmented. I think the opportunity to tell stories that are untold, have AI surface research that we wouldn't have found. When you're Googling something in the traditional sense, you might not find because I don't know what I don't know. So the AI tools that we're using are really helping us to uncover different experiences, tell stories that are not always told, that missing middle. And I think the next generation of journalists who use AI, I believe it will just become a tool like everything else. And the tabooness or the discussion on, like, for some reason, it still feels like a scarlet letter on using this media. I believe eventually we will see it just become normal. And I am super optimistic about AI getting better and serving people better, and agents being built on top of AI to do more custom work that is more custom fit for the kinds of things that journalists want to do. So in the end, I think the world of AI changing storytelling is a really good thing. It's just up to all of us to ask it to do more and check it along the way.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, Chris. Well, thank you for taking the time out.
Yeah, thank you, Peter.
I appreciate it. I know you're busy and you got another talk to do tomorrow. So, but yeah, this is lovely. Digitaljournal.com is the website.
Yep.
If you're a company, how do you get in touch? Are there ways to engage?
Yeah, just digitaljournal.com. We've got links on the bottom for those who want to write with us, those who want to help tell storytelling from a corporate perspective.
Right.
All of the links are there. And we actively and openly look for both journalists who are telling stories and companies who want to be part of that.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thanks again, and good luck with the chat tomorrow.
Thanks, Peter.
All right.
That's a wrap for today's breakdown. If you have any thoughts or questions, drop us a comment or message us on social media. If you enjoyed today's chat, why not subscribe so you don't miss another episode? Thanks for tuning in. Stay charged out there.